Okay. Hello. Hello. Okay. Let's start. Yeah. Maybe I should start laughing like I did for 1 year and not stop. Anyways. Okay. So welcome everyone. This year we decided to add this small, let's say, symposium to our graduation ceremony. And we feel like there's a lot of reasons to celebrate the graduation of our students. Of course, there's the personal reason, which is that it's a really big personal achievement for each of the students and their PIs, actually. When they graduate, is a feat of resistance, of hard work, of intellectual stimulation, that I think it's worthwhile celebrating. But at a community level, I think it's also a very important thing to celebrate because graduate students are a defining feature of who we are. I feel that their fresh and often candid approach to science is vital to our activities here. And also through personal relationships they build, when I say they, it's actually mostly you, because this is mostly filled with former students and current students. They form, or you form, this network across labs that fosters collaboration, mostly in informal ways, so sometimes just mere interactions that are actually often not optimal in terms of science, because most of these interactions are not so much driven by who is the expert that I should be asking, but who is the person that I feel most comfortable asking. And then eventually that question will get the right answer from the right person. And this builds this network that I think is very important. And we felt that we were losing that with the people that were leaving, and it didn't make any sense. It felt like we should keep the sense of community past the time people leave and just keep that going, because that's going to be important for everyone's scientific lives, and even if it's not doing research. Okay, so I just wanted to add one thing, which is that recently we were doing this, trying to collect information about where the students that graduated from here went. And I think that one thing that I would like to point out that I think is interesting is that we found out that actually most students that left are doing postdocs and are still doing research in academia. That's about 60% of the students. But many are doing very interesting things, either research not in academia or other science-related activities. Most of them, when it's not doing research, is related to science communication or science management. And that's very nice. And I think I like to think about it not just as a result of high competition in the scientific world. We know that not all students will finish to become a PI. But I think I'd like to think about this not so much as a constraint on the pressure of the environment, but actually that from this community we also value other research, other activities. Okay, and actually as the students are here, they train to be scientists, and I think that's the goal, is to be trained as a scientist. But scientists should be people with open, curious minds, and so being exposed to other activities we feel is important, and I think we have fostered that while they're here. And that somehow also opened up other avenues to do other kinds of activities that I think are very interesting. And so I like to think that the fact that we get people staying in academia and doing research together with lots of people doing other things that are quite interesting and different is part of what we think is something that should be a result of our training here. So this first symposium is a first attempt at celebrating this. And so I'm not going to spend more time, and I'll just give the word to the formers. Actually, Tiago, I think you're going to say some words, and then we'll have the students talk themselves. Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Marta, for coming back from New York. It's always hard. Okay, so I'm here briefly because Joe couldn't be. I guess everybody knows Joe just had a baby boy. So I want to join Marta in just giving everyone congratulations on completing a PhD, for those of you who will be feted at the end of the ceremony. I also want to thank Patricia, who put all this together. And it's a great initiative, and it's been a recommendation of many different people, including of our advisory board of the INDP, that we need to get a better alumni structure, that we have to have a plan and a regular integration and communication, and to make sure that everybody stays in touch and that we benefit from the experience and that we don't miss opportunities to collaborate with people who came through here. So I'm relatively new here, but I've seen the beginning of the program when it was at the IGC. I interfaced with a few of the first classes when we were running the programs together. Over the years, we had retreats together, and now it's a pleasure to be seeing a new group here as we try to figure out how the INDP moves forward. So I'm very happy with the people that were selected to come speak as alumni, because as Marta said, science is changing. There are a lot of great opportunities. People are learning to look at these opportunities as a positive thing, as a chance to do new, different things, to get out into society, to just be creative in other ways. And so I'm really happy with the spectrum of people that you got to speak that will represent a whole different range of these things. I also want to say that this is a very special program, and it's a great privilege to have it and to have the support from the foundation. This is becoming, unfortunately, very unique in Europe, that we can ask ourselves what kind of PhD program we want to have, what are our principles, what do we want to teach people, what do we think a PhD thesis should be like. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle to maintain that, and we have had support of the Champalimau for that. It's becoming impossible to do it with public sources. We are now at the stage where we no longer just have to say, well, we don't think a PhD should be done in 3 years from an Excel spreadsheet where you pick a project that already exists in the lab and tick a box, and we'll pay for it, to things that when they involve the European community, we actually have to fight so that we will be allowed to pay for things beyond 3 years. So this is really, really a very, very privileged setting, and I hope everybody is aware of that and makes the most of it. I want to say also very briefly that a lot of people help keep things running smoothly, so I want to introduce to everybody, if you haven't met Teresa Diaz and Simone Zacarias, who could stand up very briefly, because they've taken over from Alexandre and more recently from Teresa Carona, and making sure that you're all clothed, fed, paid, and can come. Huh? Sorry, Tanya Chen. Okay, Tanya Chen, who I never met, but yes. And they're here now, and they're doing a great job, and they're keeping everybody current also with what are increasing bureaucratic requirements of the universities and the FCT, and without them, all of this would eventually grind to a halt, and we would have to go in the basement and make our own PhD diplomas. Some people are artistically talented here and so on, but there would probably be problems later getting them accredited, so thank you very much. And most of all, I want to thank the students for coming in and doing such a great job, doing many different interesting things, for spreading out into different fields, making interesting connections, and really in a new place like this, full of young PIs and so on, it's a great risk for some very bright people who had, I'm sure, a wide range of options to come to a new place. Place is not so new anymore, but it's still peopled mostly by people who have their first lab, have their first research opportunity. And I think this is also great for students, because you've made the place, as Marta, I think, said before. It's a lot different when you come to a well-oiled machine and you are student number 57 and you can do great things and your friends will remember your name, but here you can really build an institution, and I hope you also take advantage of that. And we're way behind schedule, so I just want to thank all of you. I want to thank Patricia again, and hopefully get back on schedule. And congratulations to Joe, who couldn't be here, but is a happy father.
Thank you, Thiago. Okay, welcome everyone. So I'm here today to introduce our first speaker. I think most of you know me, but I'm Patricia, and I was also part of the INDP, in this case the INDP 07, which was the first edition, quite special one, just like Maria and Iris that we have represented here today. So it's always funny because you always start these things by, it's my pleasure to introduce Maria Inês Vicente. And I remember having like so many presentations in this room, or at IGC, where we had Marta or Zach or Rui presenting some friends that they had from when they were doing PhDs, and they would always tell these stories about how amazing it was to do a PhD. And I always thought, well, maybe one day it's going to be introducing Maria or someone else from the year. And it felt ages and ages ago. And here we are today. So that's really amazing. So Maria studied biochemistry at Faculdade de Ciências da Universidade de Lisboa, and I had the pleasure also to be her colleague, so we had a lot of fun, and that's why I think our passion for neuroscience started. And Maria was always very, I think the two words are determined and generous. So right from that moment, there was always like this thing of we need to do neuroscience, and she really wanted to go and study more about neuroscience, but there was nothing in the biochemistry course connected with that. So she actually went to talk with the president of the department to make sure if we could have someone to give us something about neuroscience. And she said, we really can't do that, but you can go until Coimbra, where there's the CNR that some of you might know, to talk with a few people and try to get some inspiration. And that's actually what we did, our field trip to go there and try to understand more about neuroscience. And I think that's how many things started. Right in the beginning. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so then after that, she joined the INDP program in 2007, which was way before there was this building. So we were at IGC. It was a very exceptional year in the sense that no one was here except for Marta, which was awesome to have Marta around. But then we were very lucky to have all these different speakers during different weeks. So there was weeks that there were more speakers than students, which is quite awesome actually. And so we had a very busy schedule because apart from the classes, all the evenings were busy by taking all the speakers out in Bairro Alto. We had to, like, to Alfama, show the Lisbon. So I think we were educated to be scientists and also some kind of guiding tourists, I don't know. That can tell something about us. I don't know. So yeah, so then Maria joined Zach's lab and she graduated in 2015. She did a thesis on uncertainty in olfactory decision making, which I don't think she will talk about today. But, but Maria had a very important role also for the community, and all of you that were here, I think you know, together with so many other students. She helped organize, and she was a driving force for many of the retreats or some other activities that are now somehow standard for this house. But I think it's the passion that she was always putting in these things that is also very, I like the word, I don't know, very amazing. So after graduating, Maria joined the SciComm office as a science education officer, where she worked for 2 years. And then in 2017, she decided to fly away, which happens to most of us, to a very far away place in the north of Portugal, very rich, very hard to reach, where she is now the scientific coordinator of Plataforma de Ciência Aberta. And I'm sure she will share with us many of the projects that she's been working on. So thank you so much, Maria.
Hello, everyone. No, I don't need this. Wait. Tenho. Tan, tan, tan. Tem que pôr aqui. Peraí.
Até o primeiro slide só. Isto.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be back. I think part of my introduction, Patricia just mentioned it, so I'm going to skip it, but no, it's fine. It's great, thank you. So I'm from the first class of the NDP, INDP 2007, which, well, it's great to see some of these faces here. So after that, I joined Zach's lab, and then after that, the SciComm office, which means that, summing up, I was here for around 10 years. And then I decided to leave 2 years ago. And before telling you about what I'm currently doing, we were given this challenge to think of how the INDP and how CR actually impacted what we are currently doing and our career choices. And I think I would like to start by sharing that with you guys. So, but before that, I would like to give you 2 pieces of information. So it was quite interesting actually to think about that, because I thought that it was going to be a very, very hard exercise to do, but then I felt it was very natural, and that what I'm currently doing actually arose a lot from all the spirit and all the philosophy that I learned from this place. So 2 pieces of information regarding what I'm currently doing. So I'm working in a project that is very focused on the question of how can a science center or a science project work as a platform for scientific citizenship in a community. So how can a science project be some kind of an interface between different entities in a community like schools, municipalities, NGOs, to tackle local relevant problems, okay? So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. The second piece of context is that, as Patricia mentioned, we joined this program really in the beginning, when it was actually starting, when the needs, the motivations were actually being assessed. And I think we were very lucky to be in a place where actually the bosses, the people that were on top of the chain, were actually giving us the opportunity to be an active citizenship in this community, to actually be able to contribute to that. And that's, I think, what I take as the strongest element from here to what I'm currently doing. And I would like to focus on 4 different things that actually started or were reinforced a lot with this philosophy and way of actually being. One of them is actually the retreat, as Patricia mentioned. The retreat, I think we can define it as something that is a very high pain but high reward aspect of the CNP philosophy. And I think it's amazing that it's an institutional effort, the retreat. It's something that the CR, sorry if sometimes I say CNP, sorry, sorry, too many years. So it's something that happens every year. But the fact that someone from the top says, okay, so this year we have a group of representatives from different parts of the community to actually build what you feel is going to be the identity of this institutional event happening. And then it's quite funny if you remember the ones that have gone to more than one retreat, all the retreats had different identities. And that was a reflex of the people that actually built it. And to have this opportunity, I feel, despite the pain, it's a huge reward. The second one is the student seminar series that many of you don't know what it is, but some of the ones that have been here for some time. This is the actual colloquia, which actually started already at the IGC when we were there. And there was the need of having a schedule and a program of speakers. And by the time Zach, Rui, and Marta, they proposed us, why don't you guys, students, start that? So the first set of speakers that we had in the beginning was actually led by the students, of course. And it's always like this, in collaboration with all the rest of the community, with the advice from all the rest. But we invited them, we actually made all this touristic happening, and all the event coordination. And then we also had something that was very special. At least I felt that when we were still at the IGC, which was the speakers were invited not only to give a talk, but also for something with what we used to call a nano course, which was a moment where it was just the speaker and the students, free of PIs and postdocs and just us, and then when we could decide on our own pace and our own interest what we wanted to do. I think that also that had its own momentum, and then with time it felt that maybe there was no need for that, but I think that's also important because everything that is created, and I think we were lucky with the fact that a lot of these things arose bottom up, very collaboratively, but they were also very embedded in the needs of the institute at that specific moment, and on the motivations, and I think that's what kept them sustainable throughout time. And then when it doesn't make sense, things end up okay. Thanks. The third thing is the science careers, which again, this was something that happened actually after a meeting with the advisory board and of the CR and some students. And then after some informal discussions with Banas, with João, with Clara, with Catarina, we felt that maybe there was here a need, an opportunity for something to start. And then the first thing that we did, okay, so if we need evidence to feel that this is important for the community, so let's assess if actually how many students don't know what they are going to do afterwards, what's the amount of knowledge that they have about science careers. And then after having that evidence, we presented a proposal to the directors at the time and to Alfonso, and then we also gained the motivation and the drive to continue. And now I think it's a success from the emails that I read. And then finally, the outreach and the education program, which now is the SciComm office, was also that I feel that also started very bottom up and from the motivations and needs that a lot of postdocs, PhD students, and also some PIs created, like the R event. I'm actually not part of I was not part of the initial group that started it, but I feel it's really important to acknowledge all the work. It was a huge effort that created a huge buzz in the science communication community, not only in Lisbon, and even the education program. So this to say, and now I'm going to my current life, that it's very lucky to be in a place that gives us the opportunity to contribute to something that is actually bigger than our individuality and to think in a collective sense. Okay, so what am I doing now? So I'm working for a project called Open Science Hub, which is coordinated by Leiden University. And the objective of this project is actually to take science, technology, and innovation to places that normally don't have access to it, either if it's because of a geographical border or socioeconomical border. So although I'm working for Leiden University, I'm living in the middle of nowhere in the north of Portugal, and which is here. It's close to Douro, in Figueira de Castelo Rodrigo. And this is a partnership between the Leiden University and the municipality of Figueira de Castelo Rodrigo. And the reason why I have the other dots there is because this is an European project, and this is actually the first hub of this international project that started, so it's a lot of a test tube for all these other ones. The second one is actually going to start in a couple of months in Velsen in the Netherlands, and then there are also two other in Ireland and in Spain that are going to plan to start in some months. So just very briefly, as I mentioned, the objective of this project is not to be a center in a remote area, is actually to be this platform to engage citizens, to engage municipalities, schools, NGOs, to think about local relevant problems, and then how can we do this on a project base, and then having an outcome on the specific needs of the community. So I think, and so this is, but we also have a center, and this is actually the place where I work now. This is the Douro River, really Spain is here, it's really in the border between Portugal and Spain. This is the team that I'm working at now. This is the coordinator in Leiden, Pedro Russo, and Ana Faustino, some of you know, she actually joined the project there. And it's a mixture, which is actually an interesting one, between people with PhD and some scientific backgrounds, but also with some employees from the municipality. So it's quite cool to actually have this broad perspective and insights about the community. Just to give you a very brief insight about, because I feel that for me this is essential, I'm working there, so we need to have a diagnosis of where actually we are acting. So I'm just going to give you a brief perspective of what is actually this place. So Plataforma is located here, the Open Science Hub in the border between Portugal and Spain. It's located in the low density territory. And just to give you some numbers, the population density of this place is of around 15 inhabitants per square kilometer. Wait. The population density in Guarda, which is the district of which this municipality is part, is of 30 inhabitants per square kilometer. In Lisbon is of 6,000, okay? There's limited access to science, technology, and innovation. Just to go to a university or to a science center, you take a couple of hours, and it's not just a highway, it's a tough road. There's a high school failure, and for instance, data from, and even the dropout from the data that we have from 2011, which also needs to be reassessed, is of around 25%, which is a lot. Then this is quite interesting. You end up thinking, okay, I'm going to a small community, maybe the connection between all the different entities, all the different stakeholders, between people is very high, but no. You feel there is a huge disconnect between what are the needs of the territory and what is actually taught at school. And the connection between even the enterprises, the businesses, all other projects that exist there, they are very disconnected from actually the community and the local society. And then there's super low innovation entrepreneurship, and hence there's a huge loss of young population. On the other hand, there's also good things. It's a place of 2 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. On one hand, it's the Alto Douro Vinheteiro, the High Douro Vineyard, UNESCO. It's wine, and UNESCO, it's Douro. And then it's and then it's the archaeological engravings, which is also it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Actually, currently, it's the biggest open-air site of engravings in the world. In terms of biodiversity and nature as well, you have the International Park of International Douro, you have the first and only private reserve of Portugal is there, Faia Brava, there's a lot of birds and nature, it's cool. And also the sky is amazing. In terms of heritage and culture as well, you have some of these, one of the 7 wonders of Portugal in terms of villages is there. In terms of tourism potential, and this is, well, if you want to talk about it, I love this topic, not now, but we have the entire day. But in terms of tourism, it's actually quite interesting because Barca d'Alva, which is the place where this center is located, it's like the last station of the Douro River cruises. So it means that it gets hundreds of thousands of tourists every year. But it's a very shallow tourism that doesn't leave any impact in the local economy or in the local culture. So there's a niche also for scientific tourism and for other social innovation projects in tourism. Okay, and even though it's in the end of the world, you have, you are at 3 or 4 hours from an international airport, although I think it takes less to get to Brussels than from there to Lisbon. Okay. Okay, so given this, sorry, I think I missed my 15 minutes. Given this diagnosis, we established as main objectives of this project, on one hand, to promote school performance, and also to boost entrepreneurship and social innovation. And now I'm just going to briefly tell you about how we are actually doing it strategically. I'm not going to tell you about activities, but how actually we are working on it. So our team is divided in 3 different axes, let's call it like that. I'm always here, I don't know if I'm facing my back with someone. So one of them, it's about participation in community, and this is let's say it's maybe the more classical way of working, like of a more like science center-like. So as I told you, we have a science center in Barca d'Alva, and we have an exhibition there. And the way we select our exhibition is that it needs to be an exhibition that is focused on a problem that can be worked locally, but it also has a global impact. So our first exhibition was about insects, so we use it to talk about biodiversity, and the current one is about climate change and about the impact of climate change on local communities. And we use our exhibitions, which take between 6 months and 1 year, to actually develop our educational program, and then we have activities for the schools from 3 years to 17 years old. The way we use science is more like a vehicle to think about actually daily attitudes. For instance, I can tell that you have an activity for high schoolers, and it's about electronics, and it's about building wind turbines. And we use it actually as an excuse for kids to think about how to use their car, what other alternatives they could use. So science is always a vehicle to think about something else. So then we have this axis which is about open schooling. And as I told you, our main objective is not to work as an outside entity, but actually to try to work from inside the institutions. So we are developing two different projects inside the school. We are currently working at the formal level at the subject of citizenship and development, and we are integrated in this European project, which is called Open Schools for Open Societies. And the way we are developing the curricula with the teachers is that students are challenged to think about local relevant problems. And then together, they vote on problems that they all feel are tackable and relevant for them. And then they develop strategies that in collaboration with local stakeholders, which can be NGOs, it can be the supermarket, it can be whatever they feel it's relevant, it's going to help them in their initiatives. And then they start working on those projects, and then until the end of the year, they have to actually implement it. So that's one of the strategies, and we are working it on two different levels. And then we started this year a club, a science club at school, integrated actually in the Ciência Viva network, where all these projects also have this component of actually acting upon problems that exist. For instance, one of the groups is actually developing a sustainability project for the school on recycling and on decreasing the amount of waste consumption. Another project is working about how to identify invasive plants in the region and what is the difference between that and actually the native trees that exist. So it's always connected with this perspective of looking at the territory in a more critical way and actually building knowledge on top of that. And then we have a third axis, which is we called it of social innovation. And in this case is how can you actually work with the local entities when they have a need? I can give a specific example. We are working with a local NGO, environmental NGO, and they were developing a citizen science tool with them. So they wanted to be able to have a better communication tool when people visit nature reserves, but at the same time to give the visitors the opportunity of collecting data. So what we do is that we started by using a strategy coming from Leiden University to put together all the stakeholders that we thought would be relevant for this problem. On one hand, students and tourists, and tourism agencies, which are actually the target public of this project. Then we call the managers of nature reserves, researchers, municipalities, designers, and then we put together these people for 1 week. And the objective is that by the end of the week, and given this problem, we wanted to develop a paper prototype of what would be this project. So instead of having this attitude of, I'm going to do these given these objectives, let's call the different relevant stakeholders and then to discuss and actually to make a prototype that is going to be relevant for all of them. So this is the general perspective of what we are doing. And I think I'm going to finish right now. So this to say that I feel that I started in the beginning with this, by acknowledging the privilege of being in a community that actually gave us the opportunity of contributing actively to how we function. And I feel that's the attitude that I'm actually taking to the projects that I'm actually working on, which is this way of assessing first what are the needs and the motivations of a community, and actually to put together all these strengths and all this force that exists to actually build something that can be sustainable and important for that same community. And all this to say that, actually, Gonçalo is here. It's important that we don't, particularly also because we are in a very isolated place, and none of the things that we do it alone. And we developed a set of partnerships which are actually the basis for all the things that we do. And that's it. Thank you.
So now we have time for a few questions, if there's any.
Hi, thank you. Great presentations. I'm very curious. One thing that always strikes, I think, everybody when they go to the smaller communities in Portugal is the prevalence of senior citizens. And do you have anything that specifically targets them?
Not yet. No, not yet. The only thing that I can tell you that we did, which is something very, very, very small, but that's very relevant also because the senior citizens are still very active, and it's people that still has a lot of objectives, and that should actually be put actively into something. The very small thing that we did was that, so this year we hosted the National Conference of Science Communication there in Figueira. And so we are very much in this thing of, let's not have plastic, let's not have waste, blah, blah. So we decided not to have conference bags this year. So we asked all the, how do you call it, home days, como é que se diz lares? Day center? Well, the elderly centers, to actually, so we provided them with pieces of fabric that were not used for, we collected fabric that was not being used, and we asked all these citizens that are there to actually make the conference bags. And then the money that was actually people would go to the conference and they would pay, there was a suggested price, and then all the money that was collected would go directly to these places. But we have not yet a project that is working with senior citizens.
Maria, great presentation. I have a question for you. You're really interested in reaching these communities that are very isolated. Do you guys have plans to reach other communities in Portugal, or to develop curricula that other isolated communities in Portugal, and to develop curricula that you could send to their municipalities to actually implement the kind of things that you do?
Of course. So this is, so exactly. So the aim here is actually to promote equality, right? And to provide people with the same opportunities despite the territory where you live. So definitely. Let me just tell you about what is the business model about the Open Science Hub. What happens is that, so Leiden University is the coordinator of the network. I'm actually an employee of Leiden University, but what happens is that, so there's a partnership that is established between Leiden and the local entity. In this case, it's a municipality. So it's the municipality that actually puts the money for it to happen. So Leiden is not offering anything. What is offering is the support and the network, and then the international community for the team to be sustainable. But it's the municipality or other kind of entity, doesn't matter if it's a municipality or not, that actually puts the building, puts the money, and then the team has to make it sustainable. So what's going to happen now, imagine in 6 months, is that there's going to be, Leiden University is going to get out of the equation, and then since there is sustainability for the project to take off, to continue, so then it will, so this to say that yes.
Exactly, the reason I ask is because it's such an isolated community, you have very little students that are going to benefit from the programs you have, so if you could actually have other municipalities that could actually take advantage of that.
And one of the things that we are doing, on one hand, we also have some national programs for students, but we are also doing, so there's also a lot of work doing on these, working with municipalities. For instance, now there's one thing that happens, which is these intermunicipal communities in Portugal, which put together in a community a lot of different municipalities. So a lot of the work that is also done is like trying to talk to the mayors to see how you can actually arrange a structure that can cover a bigger population, and that you can reach out to more people, and that more schools can actually, even at these, well, I was telling about these citizenships, citizenships and development. So one of the things that we are doing is that we are trying to document and to make an evaluation plan so that we can also change the institutional culture of schools, so that by the end of the year we have a document that you can say, okay, so this year happened like this, and these were the impact. So, and what takes a school, what is the amount and effort that a school needs to take in order to have this change? And then you can start taking this document to other direction boards of schools to try to see how you can change actually the institutional culture as well.
Maria, so I realize that you're not working there for a very long time, and this is pretty new, but like, can you pinpoint like the milestones that you have achieved? So like what has been before and what has happened, so like sort of the results, so like measurable that you can say that led to?
So when I started, there was nothing. No, in the sense that, imagine, there's a school, there's even the amount of outreach activities that actually reach this community was almost 0 per year, you know? This thing that you have here when you are in an urban place, that you have all these scientists going to schools, going outside, having our events, all that, that was almost inexistent. Okay, so that was that was one thing. So the first thing that we did, our first year, so now I'm telling you the story of like, okay, we have these 3 different axes. But what happened was that in the first year, we just shoot all over the place. We decided to have a lot of activity at school, we decided to have a lot of activity at the community. So the first thing that you need to create is this community of trust. When you want to work from inside the structures, you need to work, for instance, we started working a lot inside the school, supporting teachers in different activities and in projects. We started doing a lot of things in our science center. So I can tell you in terms of numbers. Actually, I think I have a slide for that, but I think it's in Portuguese. But it's in Portuguese. No, doesn't matter. So this to say that although we reached out after around 1 year of existence, we had amongst our different activities that we had, from exhibitions, workshops, field trips, well, all these educational programs, more than 3,000 people that participated in our activities, not only at the center, but also because one of the things that we try to do, we don't want to be like a static center in the middle of nowhere, but we also reach out to different schools, to different municipalities. So in terms of visitors, it was a quite big number for such a low density place. Then we started. I feel that the biggest achievement on the school side was actually to be accepted, to start working from the inside. So in the first year, as I was telling you, we were doing a lot of things from the outside. We had our center and students used to go there. We used to give support to teachers on science fairs. We used to go once in a while to some classes. And this year, the direction board told us, okay, so this year you can actually collaborate with teachers to develop the curriculum for this subject. Or this year, we will give you time to have a club at school and to develop projects. So for us, those were 2 big achievements. And then on the third side, on the innovation side, which is it's this project that we are currently doing, with this tool about citizen science, which we are going to finish in some months. But it's this more technological, social innovation side of it, where actually the entities that exist there come to us and say, okay, we have this problem, how are you going to solve it? So I would say that on one hand, it's actually to have been able to have a relatively big number of participants in our activities, to be given the possibility of working from inside in the school, and actually to be working, to be developing these more social innovation technology projects with the local entities.
Okay, last
that
question.
answers your question.
Very nice, Maria. Do you have an idea what is the fraction of the municipality budget that is put into this activity?
I know exactly.
Please
yes, I will
us.
tell you. I will tell you that because that's very important for us.
Yes.
So in the first year, the municipality. So in total, in the first year, the budget was of 51K.
I don't care about the total.
The fraction. I don't know. That I don't know. That's a good question. I don't
Because
know.
there are already
In corresponding.
several municipalities in this country that are putting more money into science and science education than the government.
But this.
And this is, of course, a shame for the government. And good for the municipalities. But
I know.
You should try to find out that.
Definitely.
And we should make big propaganda about those municipalities.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. What I can tell is that in total amount, I can tell you that in the first, so for 2 years, or 1 year and a half, 2 years, the budget was of 130,000 euros, with everything included, salaries included, plus a building, which is not included on this, okay? But there's also an effort of trying to be the most low budget that you can, and currently we have 4 people working on this project. So it's also a lot of how can we use the local resources, and so.
Thank you so much, Maria.
and I'm doing what Patricia did a while ago. So I'm extremely humbled to be introducing Gonçalo, who is my colleague from INDP 2010. And I think maybe a lot of you now don't know Gonçalo personally, but I think it's definitely not an overstatement to say that Gonçalo has been one of the people here at the CR that has influenced a lot of the scientists and the research being done here through a tool that he started working during his PhD as a side project, which is bonsai. So, and I think this reflects a bit of one of the major characteristics about Gonçalo, is that he's one of the most altruistic and giving people that I've met. And it was always, he always showed this since our first year in 2010. So just now some lighter stories. So Gonçalo is, so his background is in computer science, and he had worked for a company, White Dreams, before starting his PhD. So he had kind of an interesting background. And he came here, he said his motivation was to be inspired by brains to build like more intelligent machines, something like that. And Gonçalo is one of, if you ever have the opportunity of talking or discussing science with him, it's quite a moment that will be on your memory, because very few people share this level of passion when discussing a subject. And he would have it on a journal club discussing liquid state machines, or discussing the problem of consciousness, or whether someone dies by entering in a teleportation machine. So I was extremely lucky to share this first year at the INDP with Gonçalo. And so Gonçalo did his PhD. He worked with Adam Kampf and Joe Patton, studying the role of the motor cortex in control of movement in rats. And then he continued his scientific adventure with Adam by moving to London, but he kind of like did not follow the traditional postdoc path, and he started his own new adventure, new company called Neurogears, which he's going to be telling you about. And I'd just like to give an advice to Gonçalo. Gonçalo is, so as I said, like very giving and extremely passionate about his work and about science, and sometimes it's a bit too extreme. And there were a few interesting stories during our first year that even, for example, for the first year students, we had to do like a small activity for the CR retreat. And this was our first retreat in 2011. Gonçalo basically spent the whole retreat working on that small activity, and which was amazing in the end. And we had like everyone like controlling a mouse, trying to escape the CCU in like this interactive meta game. It was quite remarkable, but and I'm sure he's continuing the same. So we're getting older, and I think should start slowing down a little bit. Okay. Well, without further ado, Gonçalo.
Thank you. Yes, I think I share many things. I can understand what you felt probably standing here. No. It's quite daunting. And I have to say, so I want to start to say that our year, 2010, was quite pioneering in many ways, different ways than Maria's year. So you were the first, of course. But we were, I have to say, we were also guinea pigs, but of a different, more, we were pioneers of the CCU, I think, in many ways, of this center, of this building specifically. So you were the pioneers of the program. I think we pioneered this building in the scientific sense. So this was in our interviews when me and Tiago and the others in our year came to apply for the program. And this was very clearly stated from the beginning. So they took us to the construction site, and yeah, you can see this is the view from the Doka to here. So we are kind of towards here, more or less, but nothing was here. And they said, oh, don't worry, if you get in, you'll all be here in a year or something. And I said, oh, sure, let's do it. So that was quite interesting. So yeah, we were also part of the, I think one of the last years where we had the joint program with the IGC. I'm not sure if we were the last ones, but one of the last ones. And I have to say, this is my first feedback from the INDP to this IGC kind of partnership, is that I think this was fundamental. So these 6 months that I spent in the IGC, so I was coming from engineering, so I had no biology background whatsoever, and also Tiago as well a little bit. And I have to say, these 6 months changed my whole mindset about how to think about biology and science, and this actually bled through the neuroscience as well. So I think this is really, that's why this is here. I think this is really important. I would like to hear from whoever's gone after, how do you feel about this now? But anyway, so I would like to share with you some of how we kind of took over this building from the beginning. So actually, this is the room where we are standing right now. Okay, so I don't think we can take a picture like this anymore. So there's no carpets, no floors. This was the first first family of scientists that inhabited this building. This is Adam Camp, Joe, our class of INDPs, and Josh Dudman. And yeah, they were invited to basically come. I forgot his name. I was trying to remember his name, from the University of Algarve. So they brought live cuttlefish. So the thing with these first few years here is there was no equipment, because even at the IGC there was some infrastructure that was being co-opted by the program to kind of teach us. And here everything had to be imported, at least in the first year. And so there was not even any scientific equipment. So they invited, I have really forgot his name, from University of Algarve to actually bring cuttlefish to do our first electrophysiology stimulation experiment here during our first class. And I want to share that experiment with you today, because I think it has some historical significance, because it was the first ever scientific experiment ever done in this building, just if it's worth for anything. So let's see if this loads the video. We're having some issues, but hopefully, yeah. So this is it. So this is the preparation. So it's a cuttlefish. We were also practicing dissections of the giant axon of the cuttlefish, the same as the squid. And Adam and Joe, along with Josh Dudman, they were also put in charge of making this preparation of stimulation of the chromatophores on the surface, on the skin surface of the cuttlefish. So basically, you have 2 electrodes in there, and you're applying current to kind of change the surface properties of the pigmentation patterns of the cuttlefish skin that they use naturally for hiding and so on. So yeah, this is, how much time do I have? Okay. So everything was put together very ad hoc, and I think this also set the tone to me, at least very personally, that we had to build everything ourselves. So these were all like, we had to, this is during Adam's week that became a staple of the INDP as well. So this is kind of a week that I think is still kind of ongoing today, where students are challenged to build their own instruments from scratch. So they have to kind of take ownership of their instrumentation. So we learn how to use different sensors, how to build microscopes, how to take data from cameras, and so on. And I spent quite a bit of time programming different things together with the Tiago and with other people. So actually, this Tiago's creation is it's a robot for a snail. So basically, he had a snail sit on top of this wheel, and by using these 2 photosensors, the snail could actually drive itself to wherever it wanted. So it's kind of like a precursor of where things might go. Yeah, yeah, the video you were seeing here was a real-time closed-loop experiment on a zebrafish, where the zebrafish could, there was a hiding place, so he could, if he went to the hiding place, the setup would go dark, and if he went out of hiding, there was like this live predator that would come and kind of interact with the fish. in real time. Yeah, so we were kind of given this free reign of setting things up and seeing where we could go with the ideas that we had. But I want to so not only in that way this was innovative, but there was many things in which we were guinea pigs as well. So this is one thing that I'm not sure if it was ever repeated. But during Zach's week, this was a week about consciousness, that we had many of these discussions that Tiago was talking about. And during that week, actually, Zach invited these Buddhist monks to actually come and teach us meditation as part of like getting us to think about the problem of consciousness, kind of an attempt to see what would happen, like would you gain some kind of a new perspective on this problem that maybe, yeah. So this is the prayer room in the CCU downstairs, and they set up this kind of meditation place. And we every morning before we started classes, we'd go into this room and go for this meditation sessions. Yeah, so it's all very pioneer, but not just in terms of teaching. This was pioneering, but as Maria was saying, in having us take ownership and becoming an active citizen of the community, we were given total free reign. And this was surprising even to me. I was always proactive, used to taking control of things, but this even to me was a bit extreme. So this is the board of when we decided to start the seminar series that you now know as our events. So this is the first board, the first board of this, where we're discussing how to actually get this off the ground, because there was this was all student organized, so we kind of had to set up the whole structure ourselves. We were kind of thinking of things like have the website, what should it be? Should it be a Google blog? Should it be a Drupal, whatever? And what should the format be? What were our target audience, the design, and so on? What are the hosted domains? And the surprising thing is that we were having this, I was checking the dates in these photographs, and it's kind of insane. So this was in July, we were having this meeting. And then in September, October, we had this auditorium packed with people that were coming for our first event. And it's kind of like, I was checking the dates, like, oh, wow, this is pretty fast. So it's in a way. So we started this kind of student-organized seminar series where we invited the community, the overall scientific community and local community in Lisbon to come and share in the science with us. And this became kind of very successful. There was many events where we tried to kind of, we basically tried to pioneer different ways of engaging with the public. So we built in interactive games for them. We brought in, this is the moment where Adam was brought into the stage as a robot, his robot incarnation, like for Human 2.0. So the idea was kind of to provoke, inspire people to engage with science, and then kind of provoke them to take advantage of the resource that was being put in place here in the center. And I think I'm very proud to have been part of these events, because I think Lisbon remembers this somehow. Like this rippled through much bigger than, like we were just a small group of students, and to see in over the space of 3 or 4 months, like the direct impact of what we were doing through the whole community was quite overwhelming. Like I think before the first year was done, I think by the 3rd or 4th event, we had like a queue of 800 people, like outside the building. And that was quite, we didn't even know how to deal with that. Okay, so, yes, and then of course the last moment about the spirit of this is when sun sets, you go into party mode, and so this was I think the first big ever party in the CCU as well. So this was this is the canteen, the refectory downstairs, and we kind of rigged the whole building with light. So this is this is the upper corridor above the cafeteria. We filled it with LEDs. We made this massive whole building projection of, this is from the gymnasium, I think. We projected, this is the inside of the gymnasium, projecting outwards, filling the whole glass, office wall. And this was, I think, the party for the first symposium, I think, or something like that. It's like a symposium, like a first big party. And I think this became like the staple of things. So, but again, and this is so, again, I think what this gave to me personally, kind of going in the same vein of Maria's trying to explain how this rippled directly to how I'm living my life right now and what insights I took from this program, this leads me to the first insight, which was this made me aware of the tremendous potential at a personal level, because of course you hear all these things, right? But at a very personal level, it made me aware of the immense power of a community that has no fear. And this is really like, to me, where there's many reasons why we were in this kind of wild growth phase, that we had resources, we had these immense privileges of having time to do things, there was no pressure, expectations, there was like all these things. But at the end, that also enables things. So that's kind of, for me, being in a community where suddenly you can propose something and because usually, and especially being in Portugal, like this is, I've always been a very hyperactive person, and being in Portugal, there's a bit of this innate, at least my personal experience, of fear of if you propose something, people are very cautious, like, oh, why are you going to do this kind of thing? Let's think a lot about this. And for me, that was very anxious, anxiety-inducing to me. And being in this place where suddenly I could propose something, and it's like, oh, let's give it a try. It was like, oh, really? Let's do it. And then then you unleash the whole possibilities of things, and that being finally allowed to enact that was for me mind-blowing. So after that, so now with this, so this induced in me, so the ability to experience this induced in me a different anxiety of a different kind. Is that because I was given such privilege, I felt very compelled, like it kind of sets a standard for you as well. Because it's like, so if you begin with this immense privilege, you can kind of push whatever thing you want, but at the same time, you want to give it back, because it's like you want to, like, why, I don't know, it's just a thing. And so this is kind of the hidden side that I'm not going to spend too much time on this, or else I'm going to be here for a long time. This is while I was doing my own experiments here, kind of again setting up the rooms that were empty from scratch and so on. And there was a lot of engineering work put into this. And while doing a lot of this work, there was a lot of effort put into developing tools and software that was used by me to make my own experiments work. And one thing that I thought from the beginning that was coming even from the community, like, is that I wanted to give this back somehow. So that was kind of the undercurrent. Starting by the needs from my own experiments, I started developing this framework that Tiago was mentioning called Bonsai. That originally was made because I needed to prototype experiments fast. But then, talking with Nico and with other people, I realized that a lot of researchers not coming from a technology background, they would struggle kind of setting up their own experiments, their own tools. And of course, you can buy like very expensive instruments and very expensive preparations. But in the end, as a scientist, you want to own your tools. You want to build, because you want to probe things that nobody has ever probed before. So you can't really build the tool. You can't buy the tool to do that, right? It's like kind of like the Galileo example that I keep giving of like he had to grind his own lenses because people were making lenses for glasses and not for looking at the stars. So it's kind of like it's a different kind of tweaking. So scientists want to own their tools. And my experience at the company I worked with before was on doing exactly that, on building tools that people that are not technical could take ownership of. I was doing that for my own experiments, and I decided to share that with people. And this to me also surprised, because the sharing was internally only. And it kind of like, I think I gave like we started working with Nico, and he, I think, copied it to a couple of other computers, and there was no documentation, there was nothing, like it was really, like people would ask me for help, and I would give help, but it kind of exploded. And this is another thing, like, I have to speed up because I'm already out of time. But this really spiraled out of control, and without any, and this is to say the ripple effects of things again. So this started for the labs of the CNP at the time. About a couple labs started using it. And right now, my estimate is that this is used by more than 1,000 researchers spread out across the whole world. And it got to the point where people are even they're making business models out of this that I didn't even know about. So like there's apparently a company in the west coast of the United States, they sell the official software for all their fiber photometry products is Bonsai, and it's used by over 70 labs across the west coast. And I get emails from people like contacting me from Japan or from Switzerland or from whatever that I heard they got Bonsai from someone from the INDP. So it's kind of like someone comes from here and they go to another institute and because the tool is free and they can use it and know how to use it, they kind of set something up very fast and then it kind of ripples back in this crazy way. I'm going to skip this. This is just a curiosity. So this is if you ever wondered what the bonsai icon comes from, it comes from this picture. This is a bonsai tree that we actually bought. Adam bought it in a hardware shop. And we took a picture of the bonsai, and that was the icon, kind of like. Anyway, I'm going to skip this part. This is ripple effects. I'm going to skip this part because ask me about this later if you're interested. I'm going to skip it for. But the thing, so this leads me to the second takeaway, is because this part, I didn't explain all the ripples, the implications of this section properly, but this is all very painful, actually. And I don't want to go through that, like there's lots of things people that know. But the takeaway of that is actually taking time for things to develop. And when you're in and this is something that I can only appreciate much better after having gone through it, but it's like you're in the process, and I don't think you can really appreciate the impacts that things are growing without you even realizing it before they actually take their time to develop, right? So it's another thing that I think the whole experience, and this is not something that, so the first one, no fear, is something you feel right away. This one, you feel after you've been through the whole program. So the first one is like a low feedback or fast feedback. This is a much slower feedback kind of thing. Okay, and I'm already out of time, but I just want to tell you very briefly what I'm doing right now. So I started this company, NeuroGears, and again, if you're interested why I started the company, you can ask me after I'm done, but so what we're doing is taking these ideas. So we want to basically give people tools that they can own. So it's not like, so a lot of the times these days with technology, you see this model of subscriptions where you like pay for a service for kind of some black box thing that you use, and you can either pay with your data or you can pay with money. It's the same thing. But the most disturbing thing for me as a user of technology, even, is that even though you pay for these tools, either with your data or with your money, you don't actually own them, in the sense that you cannot like take control of them and do different things with them. It's very complicated. It's all filled with licenses, with the limitations, with the things that you cannot modify, you cannot. So the thing that I'm doing with NeuroGears is giving people tools that they can own. So that's the goal. And this can take a number of forms. So, of course, Bonsai is part of this. Like, I've been teaching Bonsai now for a number of audiences, not just for scientists, but also for dancers, architects, students, kids, and so on, but also other topics. So, for example, this is a very amazing example that we had a chance to work with Maria. We were talking, I think, in a student retreat last year. We met and we told me that you were doing the plataforma, and I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then I immediately said we have to do something together. And so actually, there was a chance with the Brain Awareness Week. The Dana Foundation, Simon and Dana Foundation, were giving some grant money to promote alternative and complementary education curricula for students to learn something about the brain. And we proposed this idea of let's give students a perspective on what it means to understand the brain by having them build an artificial one. So we kind of took these little robots to kids. They spent the whole week with Maria kind of assembling them, putting them together, and then when I was there for a weekend, we kind of explained the wiring side of it, like how can you connect sensors to actuators and how that can emerge, make some kind of complicated behavior emerge. And that was really amazing. It can also take the side of science engagement. So this is some interactive installation we've set up for a museum and aquarium in Brighton, in the UK, where people can watch videos of camouflaging cuttlefish, interesting, and then while at the same time we're tracking their eyes. So it's kind of like a scientific experiment. I'm going to skip this. But at the same time, so there's this side. The other side is that I'm still a scientist. So in a way, the other half of the company is prototyping technology. So this is a project that I've kind of been. All these pictures are from the same project. So it's this effort we've been trying to reverse engineer these virtual reality devices to make them very tiny and very cheap, so that they can be used as an alternative to motion capture. And this is very funny because it started by a couple of random meetings in London with a project in the style of Adam, where he basically took, so before he was taking apart microscopes, and later in London we were taking apart virtual reality systems and kind of talking with the local technology communities. We were, basically, we got together with a couple of embedded systems engineers, and we were trying to push for this. I've been trying to push for this open hardware project. So all of this is open hardware, open source, in the spirit of Bonsai. And again, the idea is to have these tools. And yeah, ask me about how all this can happen later. But the font got reformatted in Mac. But it's the other thing is that I wanted to say is trust. Yeah, the same thing that Maria said is, I think, this should not be underestimated. So these are all the main three takeaways. It's a bit all over the place, but anyway, I think I hope you got the picture. But yeah, feel free to ask.
So we have time for a few questions. Okay, so maybe I will start with a question. So what was for you like, so you first started as like a postdoc after your PhD, and this shift to starting the NeuroGears.
Yeah.
Like, did you feel that the skills that you had learned during your PhD were actually used in starting this like your own company and like getting this level of independence?
So I can tell the exact reason why I started a company, actually. So for me, this is all a continuum. So I worked in a company before, I did research before, I was in a company, I did research again, and now I'm in a company again. And for me, this is all feels like a bit of a continuum. So for me personally, at least, it doesn't feel that much different, at least from the companies I had the pleasure of being in. It doesn't feel that much different being in a company or being in research. If you come with the right attitude and you have a community that is accepting of that. But the reason I started this particular company is quite of a different kind of nature. So the reason was when I started a postdoc at UCL, they handed me this contract because you become staff, you become employee of UCL. And in that contract, it said, all the software you make from now on is sole property of UCL. And that for me was very surprising, and I couldn't accept that, because that would mean that every new development I would make of Bonsai, although they might not do anything with it, but technically it would belong to UCL and nobody else. And so I couldn't sign that contract. And I was bothering people, like, how can we do this? Because, I mean, I'm happy, I want to continue this project, I'm happy to work with whoever. And there was basically no solution, because there was UCL is a big institution, they don't want to open any precedents. There was this clause there for a reason, and it's like, okay. And then at some point, someone proposed, why don't you just open a company, and then we still want to work with you, and and then you can do whatever you want. And I said, okay, that's fine, seems okay. And it's that's the real reason. But then the interesting bit of that is you step into this unknown, because then lots of things start happening, because it feels like, maybe nothing changes, but actually lots of things change. You have to suddenly worry with accounts, you have to worry with these things, like getting support. Financial support is not trivial, because yes, UCL, they can hire me, but it takes like 3 months to be paid for something. So it's kind of like, but that means I will be 3 months without a salary. So what does that mean? What do you do in the meantime? So fortunately, I was lucky enough, and this was another thing that actually I think helped a lot being a part of this community. So actually, the first client of NeuroGears was Cristina Marquez. She was a postdoc here. She she started a PI position in Alicante, in the Institute of Neuroscience there. And they were starting their own PhD program, and they had their first PhD student cohort coming in, and they wanted to give them something that is similar to Adams Week, like putting things together and so on. And she didn't know that I was even starting a company or even considering it, but she emailed me saying, oh, we really need this, like, and I think you would be really nice if you could come here and teach us bonsai and how to build these things and so on. And she even said, we're willing to pay you if support for your visit if you would like to come and so on. You just have to give us an invoice. And it's like, oh, actually, by the way, I'm actually starting a company. So it's kind of like, and then from there, things kind of like started naturally organizing. And I think, again, I'm a bit privileged that things start arranging themselves. And I don't know if it's because I'm an optimist or if because they really do arrange it like themselves, but it's the connections, right? Again, as I think Marta was saying, like keeping the connections that you take from your PhD, that's how I was able to set up a company that is now a year and a half. Very nice, successfully. It's even chances of growing and so on, but there's no marketing involved. There's no kind of promoting this thing, like very shiny flashlights and like all these things. And there's nothing of that, but what supports it is the network. And as long as people want this company to exist, it will exist. And it's not, and I think the ability to have that natural growth is because of this, communities like this and what propagated from this place. So it's, I think, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, so maybe let's think this out.
Hello, I'm Ali. For those who don't know me, I'm INDP 2009. I've introduced my dear friend Nico. Nico, maybe he doesn't know that, but he actually was, I think, the first person I met that I didn't know that he would be in our class. Because when we came here for the interviews, he was already working here in the Dark Lab, and then he was like one of the presenters that he was showing us the mouse. It was my first time I'm an engineer and never seen mouse before. And then he was showing us, look, this mouse goes there, and he was like saying, oh, there is this thing we do, PCA. And he was asking, so what is PCA? So this is very complex, very interesting. You will learn when you come here. Well, I knew that, but I was checking if he knew it, but he was very confused. So you know Nico is a very confused person. And I was trying to figure out a way to explain him. And I couldn't for a long time. And then this morning when I was coming by train, and I thought, Nico is like a deep neural network, right? There are so many layers. There are so many things going on. You have no idea what is happening, but once in a while something comes out that is amazing. So that is Nico. So I want to leave the floor to him.
Thank you very much for the introduction. As Ali was saying, I am from INDP 2009, and I was going to do this the other way around, but everyone started talking about the INDP, so I swapped my slides. So I probably have the most, until now, and I'm not sure because I don't know the new student, one of the most eclectic kind of life stories. So in a couple of slides, I wanted to show you that I started here. So I started at circus school for my high school, and I was very much used to being in new projects because it was the first or second year of circus school here in Lisbon. And same kind of problem. New building, new course. The teachers were very friendly, and I had an amazing time, and I learned a bunch of different things. However, at some point, I decided to do something a little bit more serious, and I went to university in a new course called Reabilitação e Inserção Social, which was a spin-off of psychology. So it was a psychology minor with a specialization in social studies. And I ended up working for a long time doing stuff similar to what Maria is doing now. And I recognized exactly we had money from the Social Security, we had a house, and we had to build the whole sense of community. Target audience was kids from 6 to 24. The ones that were 24 were not this cute. They were this high and that big, and they wanted to sell you car stereos. But it was a super interesting experience. And during my whole life, since I was a kid, I had always a big obsession, which was computers. And I saw the internet grow, and I started coding by myself when I was 10. And as a way of, I started reading artificial intelligence stuff while I was working with kids. That was very schizophrenic in my head. And I decided to go to a master's, and I did a master's in psychobiology. Sorry. And that's actually when I figured out, I knew about the program. So I started at the CNP the day after the first retreat. So I didn't get to go to all the retreats. And at the time it was called, so this part I think you already heard it twice, so I'll try to go fast. It was called PGCN, so Programa Gulbenkian Champollion Neurosciences. And there was no building. So we also we got to go there. We actually have an 18 minutes movie. If you have patience and you want to see a movie from our ear, then ask me. There were much less PIs. Well, we were here. We were at the Gulbenkian, which is a beautiful place, and I really, really like, and people already said about this today, how super important it was to, the first the first biology months for me that I was coming, again, from the circus, it was super important to give us all the bases. And we had a lot of diversity in our class. The PIs were less and younger. In the movie, they actually move and talk, but I'll leave that for ask me about it. Well, and as I was saying, our class had a lot of diversity. So we had a lot of people from very different backgrounds. We had people from marine biology, from engineering, from physics, from computer science, from psychology or the circus. And it was amazing because I feel that with every new thing that I do in my life, I kind of redo. I'm always the new guy in a new situation trying to figure out the same things. And with the INDP, it was the same thing. It was new, or not really the pioneers, but kind of a third year, which is, I think it's a good, all the problems were in the first, second year. At third year, you're already more, but it wasn't. But I wouldn't have it any other way. So the spirit of having a very horizontal organization where you know the PIs very well and you go out, the speakers it was really very circus-like in the terms of a family, that we were all doing this together. It gave us a lot of sense of agency, and I believe that the art events and all of these things, and even bonsai, that they are generated because of this environment. Not to say that now that we're much bigger and there's much more people, the feeling is not amazing. I am still here. It is. I don't know what's my next slide, sorry. This is our year. We scattered more or less all around the world. Some people are still here. We try to get together as much as possible. And I really think that because of the whole community feeling of the INDP, this kind of network of people I showed my year because I was trying to pull for my year. But INDP 2010, 2008, 2007, 2011 I start decline a little bit, and further on. Not that I don't love you also, but these people were really the ones that, at some point there was the PhD had to happen and had to start, and also with all the problems of the building. I don't know if you remember, but the building was inaugurated 10/10/10, and something like a month later the government fell. So all authorizations for a bunch of stuff stopped. So no animals for a year. But Gonzalo was having classes here, and I didn't have, so I joined Zach's lab in 2008 for my master's. Then I left Zach's lab in 2009 for the classes. And when I started in 2010 rejoining Zach's lab, I had no more space at the IGC because the IGC was getting filled and fuller and fuller with people. So I was one of the first to come here. And the first week there was no internet. And then there was no animals for a year. And I really do think what Gonzalo was saying, the no fear thing also comes from having this kind of precarious situation, and you see, and you're doing similar stuff. Let's talk and let's discuss. And having time to do things is also, when Gonzalo said take the time, I think it's super important to really, people have a very fast-paced life and they want things to happen very fast. Having the possibility of saying, okay, I'll sit down and kind of recapitulate from zero what would I need to do what I want to do. And some things are available, awesome. If they are not, taking the time to build them and to construct them and to contributing to the community, I think it's super important. Having said that, after this amazing year, this symbolizes my PhD. Because I want to skip that part, because that would be a 3-hour talk. So during my PhD, I did a bunch of things, and I had the amazing privilege, because of this place, to get an empty room, and I said, we have money, do whatever you want, which, as Gonzalo was saying, it fills you with a different kind of anxiety. This has to be good. I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know, I worked on the orbitofrontal cortex, I built a new task, I built setups, I developed a bunch of things, and that happened. It's still going to be published eventually. And I finished my PhD in 2000, should I say this? 17, July. So I'm actually going to receive my diploma today also. And right now I am working with a different type of people. Well, there's not different type, they're the same type of people, but they're more. So I was thinking of what I was going to do for my postdoc, and I got an email saying, oh, you should look at this, maybe you should apply. So I did, and I got the job, and I am officially the data coordinator of the IBL, which they're fancy words that I don't know what they mean. I'll try to explain what the IBL is and what the data coordinator does. So the IBL, it's a consortium of 21 different PIs. So I went from 1 PI to 21, which is fun. We're scattered all over the world, and this is actually super relevant to what Elta Maria was saying. It's a challenge this is one of our biggest challenges, how to coordinate a distributed structure of 21 different labs that have their own interests. They all dedicate a part of their time and some resources to this common project. But the guys in San Francisco are sleeping right now, and they will wake up when I go to sleep. And people in New York have different schedule. So from west to east, we go from San Francisco to Geneva, I think is the easternmost city. And that part of the collaboration has been a challenge to organize. Having said that, this is our goal. It's very modest. So we want to understand the brain. 10 already? Okay, I'll go this as fast as possible. We want to build the first brain-wide neural model of decision-making in mice. And the idea here is every lab usually does the same thing. You have one lab, has one project, develops one behavior to record in a particular area of the brain, and sometimes they only look at one neuron. Sometimes they look at more. But so it's very contextual. And every time you want to reproduce this and do it again to add 1 point, you have to recapitulate this. And if you ever try doing a replication experiment, it's hard because there is a lot of things that are super contextual. There is a lot of knowledge which is not organized. That is that particular tech that knew how to train the animals perfectly. Now you had another tech and suddenly the experiment doesn't work. So this is very challenging. And the idea is that we're going to take one behavior in one model organism, it's a mouse, and then record from the whole brain. So we start from the beginning of the brain to the end. Everyone in the same experimental condition. We're going to record with neuropixel probes, and hopefully we get this huge data set of the whole brain in the same experimental condition. This requires a lot of work in terms of standardization, and I'm just going to mention also because I try not to go. So I have a presentation only on standardization. There is a full 1 hour presentation because there is a whole working group. We organize ourselves in working groups, which are of free entry and exit. And there is also a whole talk about the governance system, which is also, I think, it's very interesting. But just very quickly, we get a lot of things for free just by being in an institution. And so there is a vivarium that takes care of a bunch of things, that makes a bunch of decisions in terms of humidity of the room, type of food, how they handle animals. We never think about this when there's not really in the methods, unless you're doing something specific with animal food, you don't put in your methods, oh, neurons in this part of the brains represent this, but the food I use was this with this amount of humidity. So then when you want to reproduce the thing and the behavior doesn't work, you ask yourself why. So our kind of motto is whatever we cannot standardize, we measure. So there is this big effort of having lists and lists of things in different institutions, how they work and exactly what they do, and whatever we can make the same, we do. Whatever we can't, we measure, we note it, we put it into a database, and eventually will help explain variability at some point. One of the big sources of variability is actually how you train the animal. And this is part of the things that I have been involved in, is designing a fully automated protocol to deploy across all the 11 experiments. We have 11 experimental labs and 10 theoretical labs. So the 11 experimental labs will have this first phase 4 boxes each, which means 44 rigs. And so deploying a behavior for 44 rigs that is fully automated, so that it has less intervention from the experimenter that taps the box in the right moment, and you don't know when this happens, so you cannot reproduce it. And also, this is a rendering of the rig. The rig is made by freely available. These are Thorlabs parts, but they're very standardized. So you could build this rig tomorrow. If you just order this part, we have lists of all these parts. And the part which is kind of the purview of the data coordinator, this is the only thing that I'm going to say about the data part, because I had 3 slides on it, and I said it was boring, and it is. But I really enjoy it. It's how to think about data flows, and when you have these amount of data, how you organize data about the data, so the metadata, and how you allow all these different environments that have different requirements and have different cultures, not only experimental cultures, to talk a same language. And for that, we have a new data standard, which is interesting. So we went to SFN this year to present our kind of data pipeline and a data standard. There was a lot of people very interested in it, and I had the feeling for the first time there is a real need for a universal data standard that says, okay, this is electrophysiology data, and I know how this data exists on computers, so I can analyze it using Bonsai, using Python, using MATLAB, or using whatever, but I don't have the problem of opening the file, of having someone to program something to open the file. How are things organized in the file? What file is this? So we have a solution, which I'm not going to go into, but this has been, right now, the deployment of the task has been 90% of my work, and the development of the pipeline and the implementation of the pipeline is the other, and I have a lot of very good people that are working with me. So just very briefly explain to you exactly what task we are doing and where we're planning to record, which is the whole brain. So the task is a visually guided discrimination task based on the Burgess task from the Carandini and Harris lab. So basically we have a head-fixed mouse that's looking at an iPad screen, and Gabor patches appear on the left and on the right. the wheel, turning the wheel will move the stimulus. The goal of the mouse is to put the stimulus in the center in order to get water reward. If the animal puts the stimulus in the center, he gets a drop of water. If he puts it the same amount of degrees to the other side, he gets an error tone. Contrasts vary, and so you can build nice psychometric curves. And this is our first pass of the brain map that we want to do. So we have a 500 micrometer grid that spans from the olfactory bulb back to the cerebellum. This is only half of the brain, the other half is just duplicated. We have 2 depths per each penetration, and we're actually, there's a physiology meeting going on right now. We're actually discussing exactly this implementation that's supposed to start in February. So for recording it because it worked, and that's this is my, I guess it's my last slide. It's to show that the thing actually works. So this is an example, 3 batches of mice, one from Lisbon, one from New York, one from London. As we speak, there is people shipping rigs to the other laboratories that are joining. And what you're seeing here is the performance or percentage of right word choices when the animal should go right and when the animal should go left as a function of contrast. And the interesting thing here, and this can only work if you find that the inter-subject variability is higher than the inter-lab variability. So one of the jobs of the data coordinator when the pipeline is fully deployed will be to have constant checks on independent, different places of the world, different types of water and different types of anything. You have to look at the data and see if they're flowing in the same direction. If you have one of the rigs that's going down, you have to have warnings, and this will require real-time analysis, so that's why the pipeline and designing the thing properly is very important. And it's super exciting. It's the kind of work that I really like to do, and I discovered this here at the Champalimaud. But not many people like it, which is good for me. And the last thing is, yes, we're open. We're, as Maria was saying, we're open access, open science, and open source. So our rig is fully open source from hardware to software. Everything that we are developing is on GitHub, and you can go there today and download the code if you want. It's not very well documented, and it's still a work in progress, and we're working on the documentation. If you want more information on the IBL, you can go to our website. We also have a Twitter, which is nice. And so with that, I'd like to thank everyone from the IBL. This is everyone I could find. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. And specifically the people that are involved in the database or the data group that really helps built on top of stuff that was already there. And without them, it would be impossible to do this enormous amount of work. And thanks to the funders, which is the Wellcome and the Simons Foundation, and everyone at the CNP. Okay. That was not that long.
Good timing. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions,
Yes,
but I'd like
sure.
to start by a comment, which is you're saying that the goal is to have the exact same experiment, the exact same analysis across all labs. But already in your first example, you have London with 6 data points, and the others with
because it was
9 data points.
Yeah.
So I was wondering,
No, you're right.
how much can you actually, if it's feasible to really say what you're claiming you want to do?
These are not fully trained animals. That's why. In London, they have a different. So they have the organizations. They have. No. It's my bad. I picked the.
No, but I mean, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I really would like to understand to what extent you think that you'll actually be able to do it so standardized as you say, because this to me tells me that there's a problem from the very get-go.
Yeah, this is actual data. I should have plotted the published data, which is this task that we reproduced, and that they have much more points. I decide these are real, the animals that are being trained now, and they are not at the same level as these two because they have less contrast that were introduced.
Right, but then it means that are you introducing different contrasts all at the same rate at the same?
It depends on the performance of the animal, and we have strict. So the experimenter does not do anything. The task decides when the animal is ready to get a new contrast, and which is based on the previous performance and based on the current. It's both a low pass over sessions and a high pass over previous trials.
And so, do you mind if I just another question? And then the second question is related to the recordings. Okay, so that grid, that is a sequential. What is it? It's not clear to me at all. What this means? Is it simultaneous?
No. So every rig will have it's two sites simultaneously, and we have to distribute the sites. This is actually what we're discussing in this meeting right now. How to distribute the site, because you don't want the same lab to have all frontal cortex and one lab to have all of cerebellum.
Right. That's why I was going to ask how you distribute across. How do you randomize somehow? Okay.
So we have to randomize it because so all of this assumes that the behavioral data is also randomizable. So if that's the case, then you have to randomize the thing. Otherwise, you will have biases from locations. Yeah. And this is very much the first pass map, which will be homogeneous. But we already have planned a second pass map, which will. So there are some things that technically are difficult to reach. For example, olfactory bulb. Although I come from an olfaction lab and I really like it, most of the people it's hard to get at, and so most of the people don't record. And probably in the first pass, it will be hard to get the olfactory bulb. Some of the sites in the midline, and especially here over lambda, because of the sinus, will require a different angle. And so all of these exceptions, which is given the mouse physiology, will go for the second pass. So this is the full map. From this map, we will remove the sites that are technically challenging at this moment, run the whole thing, and then fill the holes. And in the second pass, you will also have more directed questions. So specific postdocs in particular labs will be allowed to pursue also, I think that recording from here and from here, it's interesting if we try. So the map will stop being uniform and start becoming more, probably everyone will have more questions on frontal cortex and motor cortex and auditory cortex. Basal ganglia will be, I don't know, so it will depends on the labs. It depends on the, but the whole idea is that all of this data set at some point, I think there is a small embargo period, but at some point will be completely publicly available. So you will be able to, using the tools that we're developing right now, which are also open source, download our library and then connect to the database and download the data directly and run your analyses, models, whatever you want on it.
Any other question? Hobbies?
So I was just wondering, so after hearing your talk after Gonzalo's talk, and this now is all about standardization and all about it doing exactly the same thing. And Gonzalo, and also I know what you did in your PhD was a lot about being more spontaneous or being creative and trying new things and developing your own software or so that you could be more flexible. So to me, there seems to somehow a real tension between these two things, or which way we should be going. More flexible and trying to do more things ourselves and create our own stuff, or complete standardization where there's no room for any flexibility, basically.
So I think that complete standardization is what you usually call a fool's errand, because you cannot have everything exactly the same in every places. What you need is good APIs. What's an API? It's a good conceptual interface layer between what you have available and what you want to do. And in that sense, our pipeline is designed, if you want to use a different rig, different type of task, as long as you save the data in one particular way. So that's the only big advantage that we create of the tools that are available is this extraction step here. But from raw data, we have this extraction step where you convert the files in a very, I knew I should have put in the slide. I have the slide somewhere. Yes, this one. So that's the only trick of our data format or data standard is that we don't want to figure out what NS5 means or what the particular software or hardware that has proprietary thing. We extract one thing, where all the things that you want in one file, and the files should have, well, first of all, it should be human readable, and this is humanly readable. I did this experiment at SFN. I asked everyone, okay, if you want to plot performance of this animal, this is an example session, what data would you need? And so, okay, we would need what the contrasts, and probably what's the feedback, if it was a good feedback or a bad feedback, and that's it. And that's the only files that you need to extract. The NPY just means that it's a NumPy array, which even if the computer doesn't know, we provide loaders for all the extension that we support. But the trick here is that this is not only human readable, the choices of the files that you use are stuff that you can open in your computer. So you either save it in flat binary files and you provide a loader, or you save, for example, especially for metadata, stuff in JSON format, which is a text file that you can open and read and look at it and say, oh, okay, this session run this protocol with these parameters. And it's not hidden in some weird file. On your general point about creativity and standardization, standardization is not limitation, and creativity is not absence of limits. I find that I'm most creative when I have limits. If I'm completely free to do whatever I want, I don't know what to do.
No, but like this whole thing about it, at the beginning we didn't have very much, so we were a lot freer because we had more time, and then it produced a lot of things. But like there's some uneasy balance here that I'm not quite sure, and I'm not quite sure how to say it well.
For me, the
And everyone's been saying, yeah, because at the beginning we had to make it all ourselves, we had to do it all together.
Depends on the question you're asking. If you kind of want to explore something that no one is doing, then you should be free to think about what is the perfect task and questions to do so. But if you already kind of have an idea of what you want to know, which in this case would be like understand how the whole brain reacts or computes whatever task, then you want to standardize. So I think it's kind of a debate on what is the question that you're asking.
I think we need more alcohol for this. So, I just want to ask one thing actually. So, are you planning to analyze microbiota of these animals?
The what?
Microbiota. That they are in different places.
I'm currently programming a script that is called Poop Counter, so yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Thank you, Nico.
So I'm going to I'm going to be introducing the last speaker of the evening, Irish, who's from my year. So he was PGCN 2007, same thing, same cohort as Irish. So Irish did her undergrad in biology here in Lisbon. She did the master's in mathematics applied to biological sciences here in Lisbon too before joining the PGCN 2007. She went on to do her PhD with Conor and Cording in, she has very beautiful long blonde hair, at Northwestern, which she finished in 2013, studying uncertainty and decision making in humans. Then she went on to join Reed Montague between Virginia Tech and London to do her postdoc. And that's when we became flatmates. And so just to illustrate Irish with a couple of anecdotes. I love her very much. So the thing is that during our year of classes, most of us wanted to do like really experimental stuff on animals and the such. And part of the reason I think why Irish decided to do studies in humans was because she was a vegetarian. She was a somatic vegetarian. She ended up meeting a germline vegetarian and marrying him because he was born vegetarian. She's very determined with what she wants. And then when we lived together in London, during my first birthday in London in 2016, she had a paper deadline that same day, May 5th, but she still made dinner, she bought the cake, she sang happy birthday. Then at the end of like 11 p.m. when like everyone there was half shit-faced already, she still went back to the lab to finish the paper, and then she went home and stuff. So she's a very, very, very generous person aside from Berlin. So yeah, this is Irish, so good luck. Oh, and she's the first alumnus PGCN to get a faculty position, which she is starting at Minnesota. Yeah, there you go.
Hello, everybody. First, I apologize because I just came from the US this morning. So if I say something that makes no sense, just pretend it's because of the jet lag. So I also, okay. No? Which one of them is it? Okay, step number one. Ah, it's not open.
Which one is yours?
It should be, this one,
04.
yes. They all look the same. That's the whole point, because they all have to start the same. Okay. Exactly. So the problem with standardization is that you cannot identify exactly which one is which. On the other hand, it makes it clear that it's all part of a group. Exactly. So it depends on the question. So I didn't actually have time to change around. I wanted to do like Nico, and I'll change back the slides given what I saw in the first ones, but my slides were already here, and I was like, okay, well, whatever. So we'll get mine upside down. Please interrupt me whenever you can, because then I won't fall asleep, which is good. In general, I just wanted to like tell a little bit about myself. I didn't really know what I was supposed to say, so then my goal, as the goal of some people here, is also to understand how people make decisions. Well, many people here study how mice or rats make decisions and hope that also informs for humans. I go directly to the humans, just because I can talk to them as well, most of the time. And then I want to apply it to real-world problems. Things like what, ideally I would like to do what Maria is doing as well, because it's, and what everybody here is doing and applying it either to building tools that everybody in the world can use, or helping communities, or helping the replicability of science. So I'm actually overall very impressed with this program and how people went through. So I use behavioral tasks, fMRI, which most people in INDP, when I started, didn't believe. My PhD supervisor didn't believe, and I use it now as because it gives good blobs, but sometimes I don't believe it myself, but it has good things and bad things like everything. Some pharmacology, and then computational techniques. So briefly, just to see how long it takes me, during my PhD I worked in how prior and current sensory uncertainty are represented. And what does this mean? So when you are making a decision, you have to combine both your prior information from the past with the information that you're getting right now. Okay, and I just wanted to know where these types of uncertainty are represented in the brain. After this, and this is an example of procrastination, because I started doing this during my PhD. In fact, I saw like the project idea was, the file was 2011. And it came out 2017, not too some years later that this happens. But basically after this, because we saw that the putamen was involved, we actually went and looked at people with Parkinson's disease and to see how much they combine prior versus current information. And our idea would be that when they are without dopamine, that they will rely more on the prior, and that's what we observed, although it's 15 subjects, and who knows. So then for my postdoc, I also looked at decision-making under uncertainty, but in the context of neurolaw. So this was actually a very cool project because I was working with lawyers, and turns out lawyers have a lot of money, so when you go to their meetings, they pay you to fly overseas and to stay in a 5-star hotel in the beach. So I wouldn't mind. Plus they are very nice in their feedback. While scientists generally say this is what is wrong, what is wrong. The lawyers are, they know how to talk. So it's like, I wanted to keep on working with them. Anyway, so in this one, we just basically use imaging data and build a machine learning algorithm to try to identify if a person, when they are doing, well, in this case, was a small crime. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen Orange is the New Black. Okay, so in the Orange is the New Black, well, Peter doesn't count because Peter I was working on this while, complaining with him about everything. And Orange is the New Black, the main character, right? She goes to jail because she's caught with a suitcase full of, I think, money from her at the time girlfriend. And then the question is, did she know that she was carrying the suitcase full of contraband money? Or she didn't know, but she was just being reckless, like saying, like, I know my girlfriend is doing something probably tricky, but I'm just not going to ask, right? It's different, and it's valued differently in the law, that you knew for sure you were doing something wrong versus you knew you're incurring a risk, but you didn't act, so you're just being reckless. And that might make the punishment be very differently in the US. So we just, do the bit like kind of like fancy lie detector. This one was interesting because it got a lot of press, people complaining about us, of course, and suggesting for us to put politicians in it. And what I've been doing more lately, the last part of my postdoc, which again still needs to be published, will be eventually, is using then computational psychiatry, so using computational models to understand decision-making in people with psychiatric diseases. And this could be, the ones I'm working now was people with borderline personality disorder and people with antisocial personality disorder. Now, antisocial personality disorder is not people that just are afraid to talk, are just people more like the psychopaths, which really don't care too much about other people. But this can be used as well, the same things for depression, anxiety, things that are more pervasive. So this is in a very nutshell what I've been doing. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, so I'm just going to give you a brief outline about the steps I've taken, which Pedro already talked a little bit. So I studied in Lisbon. I studied biology because the animals were cute and, basically that's it. And I studied in this very beautiful building, which at least Maria and Patricia can know what it is. If you wonder if this is still in construction, no, this is how it looks like every time. Like when my cousin came to visit from the Netherlands, they thought this was a prison cell, other people thought it was different things. They never figured out this is a university. It's actually really nice. It was a really nice experience. It's just that, it's not very pretty. But so then I did what to do after my undergrad. So I thought, do I want to do a PhD? And the answer at the time was very clearly no. So I was like, no, this sounds too complicated. And people seem to be very Mennonites in one PhD defense. I was like, no, I don't want this. Do I know exactly what I want to do? And the answer was also no. So the only thing that I knew, or that I've always done, just maybe due to lack of originality, but I always wanted to be a teacher or a professor. It's like, okay, I want to go there, but then, maybe I can teach primary school or high school kids. So then the decision was basically to procrastinate the decision and do a master's instead. Also, the building was much prettier. The Isa, I don't know if you have you passed by it in the bridge, very, very pretty. No, that's not the reason why I chose it, but it's a big plus. But having the mathematical background really helped me, because in biology you really don't get too much. And around this time is when I started having connection with what would be the INDP, and which really changed our lives. But in the beginning, so while I was doing my master's, first I went to work with Marta and with Elio and Isabel. And basically what we were doing was a prisoner dilemma in rats. You see, so you have the prisoners, and here there's actually the rats. So the rats were doing the prisoner's dilemma. And it was fun, but then I discovered that I didn't want to work with rats. It was too hard for me. So then I decided, okay, I should go and do something else. But I really enjoyed being at the IGC and all the experience all together. So then I worked in theoretical immunology, which has apparently nothing to do with neuroscience, although nowadays it's discovered that it might have a lot, actually. And so then by then I was convinced, yes, I do want to do a PhD. So then, then this picture you have seen in the meantime, I took it from the website, so it's a bit more blurry. And as you also know, that it changed names. At the time was Gulbenkian Champalimau, and now it's International Neuroscience PhD program, which is easier to say. And we were the guinea pigs of the experiment, right? We were the first ones, and we were figuring everything out, which was exciting and confusing, and it was nice, very nice, and we had very good times. And this was both, there were 3 PhD programs. There was the neuroscience one, the computational biology one, and just the general IGC one. And again, what has been said before, the first 3 months were really, we were all together learning things, and that was really, really nice. And so I just wanted to point out some things that the INDP gave me. One was amazing colleagues. Thank you very much. The other thing was learn how to critically evaluate papers. This sounds a bit, general, but this is one of the distinct things that I remember, because maybe when you are in your degree, you already start thinking, okay, maybe not everything is correct. But I remember distinctly going through, we will be shown one paper, and then no matter the paper, okay, in 1 week they will trash down the paper to the point there's okay, there's no perfect paper. And after that, I learned that myself, and that's what I do now. So in fact, now I was doing to the undergrad, and the undergrad was saying, oh, but then I should change my project because you found some mistakes. No. You are supposed to find mistakes in all papers. The question is how to, do the best that you can with the problems with the fact that you cannot do perfect science, right? That the science is imperfect just because you cannot control everything. And then it was also during this time that I met my PhD supervisor. So we had the amazing opportunity to have every week or every 2 weeks amazing scientists that came. And that's why I also met my PhD supervisor, which this was the first picture I had of him. Okay, this one, but this one seems too normal, and this is much more representative of his personality. And it's also, we also met a lot of rising stars in neuroscience, right? For example, this is one time, as Patricia was saying, we had the trouble of going out and, going for dinner with them, which was always very nice. So it was a good job to have. And many of these people are actually very well known in the field, but we didn't know about this, which was very good. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to speak. The moment I knew there was somebody famous, I couldn't speak, only after 5 years. But because we didn't know them, we could just speak with them, with no problems. Plus, they would also felt relaxed around us, so they would also tell us details of their life, which means that now we have a lot of blackmailing opportunities. So that you know. So where did I end up doing my research project? So at the time, as some of you referred, this is how the building looked like when I left. So there was not much building to exist. And the very few labs that were at the Gulbenkian Institute were doing mice and rat work, which I decided that I didn't want to do. So then I decided to go a bit far away to Chicago. This is the first part, to work with Conrad. And then basically, and afterwards, it was exactly, and I noticed that it was exactly 5 years ago, because it was 17th of December, that I defended my PhD thesis in this room, which was also the first PhD thesis being defended in here. Because before, Zé and Patricio had defended at the auditorium or somewhere. No, at a different, at TQB, exactly. So, yeah. And I was oh, it's exactly 17th of December. I didn't know that. And you probably know some of these faces. So basically then very quickly, then from Chicago, because I was just moving around a lot, I went to Roanoke, which most people don't know where it is. I didn't know where it was, but it's around here in Virginia, where people have Confederate flags and other kind of interesting things. But it was a nice place. And with Reed Montague, which works in decision-making and human decision-making. Then from Roanoke to London, which was again a big change. So I went back to Europe. So far, still European Union. Although when I was there is when I decided to not be European Union anymore. So, but this is correlation, not causation, hopefully. But actually, I changed places, but the boss was the same. Except that I also had an additional collaborator, which was Peter Dayan, which would challenge me to learn more and more about math. I still felt very, very stupid around him, but at least I could learn from him. So then, because my then boyfriend, now husband, was still in the US, so I would do this trip quite often. So I learned how to work in the plane quite well because, yeah, there was many travels. And so now, since August, I am starting my position at the University of Minnesota, and I could tell you about it, but I want to tell you about it like later when we're all together socializing. And I wanted to look for good foods in Minneapolis, and what appears is beer. That's what Minneapolis is famous for, and for the winters, which are a bit cold, but the summer is really nice, as you can see. And I'm also looking for PhD students and postdocs, so if anybody ever wants to come, it's really, really nice in the summer, and in the winter, the houses are very warm, so it doesn't really matter what's outside. And I want to thank you all and the program.
Questions. I'm sure I have a question, but I'm sure I have someone else. I'll give you some time. Oh, here you go.
How did it feel for you? I'm just a personal curiosity.
Yes.
How did it feel for you being away from the community growing over here, like over the years?
I was curious, like, so when I came a couple of times for the retreat, and I was always impressed. Every year there seemed to be like there was exponential growth.
Yeah.
In one hand, I wish I'd been more involved because I didn't have so much. I had connection with individual people, but not so much with the program. But I still had the opportunity to go to quite a few of the retreats, and so I enjoyed seeing it grow. Yeah. That's why I'm happy that I was invited now here, and that I would like to maintain some kind of connection with INDP.
Other questions? I have a question for you. Now that you're on your way to becoming a full-fledged professor, if you could have said anything to you when you were doing a PhD, if you could like send back a message, what would you have said to yourself?
Everything will be all right. I mean, my PhD was actually not very stressful because my boss was very great. But so that's more a message for my postdoc. It's the postdoc that you start like freaking out. Oh my God, will I be able to get a job? But yeah, everything will be fine. Like whatever route you take, it will work out. Wherever you're supposed to be.
Okay, that's a good note. No further questions? Okay, that's a good note to finish on. Okay, thank you.
Now we are going to have our brief ceremony of the INDP recently graduates, and then we'll have a toast outside. So bear with us. This is going to be quick now. And yeah.
Right, everybody. So I think we're ready to start with the actual ceremony of recognizing all these great students that have actually make it to the end, to the they've seen the light, and I like those last words, everything is gonna be all right, for those who haven't yet. And so I wanted to start by just recognizing a couple of colleagues, young colleagues that are actually cannot make it today, so that we know who they are. So we have a couple of INDP students who have been graduated for the past 2 years. This is a collection of grad students in the last 2 years. Jacques Bourg from the Renaud Lab, Sophia Suarez, yes. Sophia Suarez from the Peyton Lab. Asma Motiwala from the Mahens and Peyton Lab. And Simon Lackner from the Orger Lab. And we also wanted to recognize those other great grad students who are not or have not been within the INDP program, but they have been very active members of our community. And so we have Samuel Walker from the Ribeiro Lab. Samantha Hebert from the Ribeiro Lab. Joaquim Alves da Silva from the Costa Lab. And Rita Dominguez from the Behavior Lab. And also Samuel Bana from Mining Lab. Diana or Bana? Diana. That's what I thought. Sorry about that, Samuel. All right, so now we go in our current graduates here. Nicola Munake. Parabéns. Andrea Cruz. And Tiago Marquez. I just wanted to say something about the actual gift. Which it's a symbol, a metaphor for what we think grad school is there for, which is to bring and to develop tools that are going to be useful not only as young scientists, but as civilians in the world, whatever steps you're taking. So this is a nice sort of metaphor for that. And congratulations to all of you.
Okay, so now I'm. So first, thank you, Eugenia and Marta, for this ceremony. And so now I'm representing my colleague graduates from the past 2 years, and just want to say a few words about the experience of INDP for me. So I guess everyone, today has been like a trip in memory lane. Like we've seen pictures from when this building was just being built, and but it was not just a building. I think it was ourselves. So I say this, and I'm sure like this is a feeling that is shared by almost everyone that passed here that this is truly a life-changing experience. And I'm a completely different human being than who I was when I joined this PhD program. And so I would just like to address 3 different groups of people. And the first are the people that actually allowed this to happen. Like, so all the faculty since the beginning of the CR, back then CNP, and all the directors of both the CR and of the INDP. I really think that you managed to do something quite unique, and all of us that alumni and now current students, we acknowledge that. And I can say that when I was from the year where the Portuguese students were still allowed to go abroad to do their PhD projects, and as Iris did their PhD project abroad, I had the opportunity to go abroad, but also I was watching this community just growing, and I decided to stay here. And that was by far one of the best decisions that I think I've done, because I think that this what we have here is really quite unique. And now I'm afraid of going somewhere new that I know that won't be able to replicate this. So this was without any doubt the result of all the efforts and the dedication that all the faculty put into this project, and that's. I would really want to thank and all the people that were involved in the INDP. So let's. So the second group is, so I'm INDP 2010, but if you've seen, this program started in 2007. So there, when I joined, they were already older. Well, some of them were not exactly older, but there were some more senior, wiser PhD students. And I remember there was, I mean, for a reason, there was this letter, like, and I think it was a sentence that some of the faculty described, like, the PhD students here, and there was something written as, like, that the PhD students, we were the glue of this community. And I really feel that. And so I think that, like, the faculty were crucial for what the CR is today and what the INDP and all the students that pass through this program are. I also feel that the students themselves, and especially the first students, were in determining this project. So, and we saw this today already from the first talk, from Maria's talk, as this mentality of being involved and engaged and working the things from the inside. And I think that's something that is just one of the things that makes this place special. And I've been here for many years, and things are changing. The community is growing, but still, I recognize that some of these aspects are not going away, and I hope that they continue to be part of the philosophy here. So now let's all thank all these PhD students. And so in my final group of people that I'd like to address are the current PhD students. So you are the future of this program, and it's I don't know, when I started, I was coming from an engineering background. I didn't know anything about neuroscience, and I was overwhelmed with the amount of information, and all these people seemed to be way more knowledgeable than I was, and I understand now if some younger students feel the same position, and they look at what the alumni have accomplished, and like this the standing on the shoulder of giants, and I think that what you should take from the program is not trying to achieve to have like the best publications or I don't know, the highest impacts, or you should see this really as a school for life, And it's, I think it's true, in the end, everything is going to be all right, but the process may be painful. And everyone that has done a PhD knows that, of course, not all experiences are the same, but it can be made better if you help yourselves. So if you, the worst thing, so my advice for a younger PhD student, or a less wise PhD student, would be not to, even when things are not going well, not to isolate yourself and rely on the others, because your colleagues are probably going through the same experiences, facing the same issues. And so it's the worst thing you can do is really that, is just isolate. So just try to keep this community feeling and be engaged. When you're helping someone else, that person in the future is probably going to help you back. And so I think it's very critical. And don't try to have huge goals, or just try to learn and enjoy, have fun in the process. So that's my advice for the younger students. And now we should have a toast, I think.